So we've just come through Yom HaZikaron, the day of remembering. We had shofar blasts, zichronot, remembering, asking God to remember. We spend a lot of time as Jews with the understanding that we are people who are commanded lizkor, to remember. Yizkor, one of the most touching, important services that we have all year. Yizkor is about zachor, remember. We light 2 candles on Shabbos. Shamor, to keep Shabbat, to guard and keep Shabbat. And the other candle is zachor, the 2 commandments around Shabbat, Shamor and zachor. Zachor, for us, is at the heart of who we are as a people. We just, of course, marked the yahrzeit of October 7th. And a reporter called me because she got pictures that the Apali newspaper had sent their person to take. And she was writing up, kind of a story about it to go with the pictures. And so they said, she'd like to ask you a couple of questions. I said, no problem. So she calls me and I said, how can I be helpful? And she said, so why is it important for you and your community to mark this day? And I was like waiting for something else. And it took me probably 45 seconds to really understand the question. I was like, why is it important to mark the anniversary of what happened on October 7th? Well, where do you begin to explain to somebody why that's important? So I explained a little bit about our tradition, about yahrzeit, and about anniversaries, and that around the anniversary of a loved one's death, we light a candle, and it's lit for 24 hours. So as we walk through the house and see that candle, there's something else that happens. We feel something when we see these candles, and there's something else that happens for those of us who light yahrzeit candles when you see that flame. And that person is there in our world in a tiny different way than usual. And it's very sweet to me when I forget I've lit a yahrzeit candle and I come downstairs and it's on the kitchen counter. And it's like, oh, right. Hi, Dad. I miss you. So it's just so ingrained in who we are that I didn't exactly know how to answer the question. So I talked a lot about all of this stuff. And then I said, as Jews, we do a lot of what we do in memory of other people. And this event was so big, how could we not all want to be together to mark that anniversary, to mark that first yahrzeit, to be together, to light a candle together, not just home alone on our kitchen counter, together. The rabbis give us this opportunity to light together, to be together, to remember together at the end of every festival in their wisdom, their deep wisdom. Because we're commanded to celebrate on holidays. We're commanded to be joyful and to experience simcha. About the holiday of Sukkot. You shall rejoice in your festival, and you shall be only joyful. But the rabbis know, as much as we want to lean into our holidays and enjoy them, the first one after someone's gone, the first one is so hard. And sometimes it's hard to rejoice when we're carrying around the memory of someone we've loved and someone we've lost. And so in their deep wisdom, they're like, so celebrate, and we will provide a place for everyone who's grieving to hold space together at the end. So just know it's coming. You'll have a chance to cry. You'll have a chance to remember them. You'll have a chance to be together. For now, celebrate. So we will have Yizkor, of course, tomorrow, because it is the end of the festival of Yom Kippur and the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the 10 days of repentance. When we were at, Cantor Frankel and I officiated an unveiling yesterday, and the person speaking about his father, the unveiling was around a year, just before a year, that he'd lost his dad. And he and his 3 brothers each spoke, and he said that they've never lost anyone close, that he'd never heard this phrase, may his memory be for a blessing. He was like, I didn't know exactly what that's supposed to mean. Like, what is that? And he was hearing it now all the time, because as someone else heard about his father's death, they would say to him, may his memory be for a blessing. They would send a note or a card, may his memory be for a blessing. That's how they ended the email, may his memory be for a blessing. And he said, it took me about 8 months, almost a year, to figure out what that means. And he said, for what it means now to me, I understand it now. That the way my father's blessing functions his memory functions as a blessing, it means I should live the way he wanted us to live. That I should live the values that he stood for and believed in. That I should try to fulfill myself and be the person he saw in me. That's his memory being for a blessing. To live into the people who loved us the most, what they saw in us, and to try to live more like that, a little more generously in their memory. We are a people who does great acts of kindness and generosity in remembering our families and remembering the ones we love. Great acts of generosity. That is how our loved ones stay, as we say at the end of Kaddish, tzror b'tzror ha'chaim, bound up in the bonds of life. Because we act in their memory. And it goes back as far as Torah. If you look at Torah, everywhere it says that God remembers, any place it says God remembers, there's an action that goes with that. We've got Noach. God remembers Noach, and the rain stops and the water starts to dry up. God remembers Rachel, and she becomes pregnant and bears a child. When God remembers the Israelites in Egypt, they are redeemed and freed from slavery. When God remembered Hannah, she conceived and gave birth to Samuel, to Shmuel. For Judaism, as far back as Torah, remembering is not something passive. It isn't like, oh, I just remembered. For us, Zachor is a holy commandment. It's a mitzvah. It's a little crazy, but it's true. For us, Zachor, remember. Say their names. Give in their honor. Give in their memory. Do something for someone else that your loved one who's not here knows and would be so proud of you for doing. That you know they would have done it if they could and wish they had more. For us, Zachor, remember, is about action, about doing, about being better, being more of what they wanted to be and of what they wanted to see happen in this world. The Israeli writer Edgar Keret, whose parents were Holocaust survivors and refugees, wanted to do something for the internally displaced in Israel, both from the north and the south, because of what was happening. I know everyone thinks Lebanon, this just started the other day, but they've been shooting missiles into Israel, in northern Israel, for 11 months. So people have been displaced for 11 months. That means kids have to go to school in a hotel. They have to design schools in hotels because the kids can't live in their homes. In the south, of course, we have massive amounts of people displaced. And he really wanted to do something. His parents were refugees and that came to Israel. And he said, I want to help the refugees of Israel. And so he asked around, like, what could I do? What would help? And bereaved families, like, what do people need? And they said, well, we need drivers. We need people to drive people places. And he said, well, I thought it was really cool when I was young not to learn how to drive. So I don't drive. And he said, what else do people need? What is needed right now? And they said, we really need people to cook meals. And he said, I'm a terrible, terrible cook. You got anything else? So he was, trying to figure out other places he could call and see what he could do. And as he was going to a bomb shelter. He had to cross, because the sirens went off, he had to cross through a big party that was going on, and everybody was going to now need to go to the bomb shelters. So he comes through that room, and somebody stops him. Some cool guy, he said he looked like, this really cool, hip, gorgeous, young, Israeli guy, stops him and says, "Are you Edgar Keret?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, I just came out of 131 days fighting in Gaza. And I report for duty in a few days again, because, of course, you don't get to say, "Oh, I'm tired now." And I'm about to report for duty again, so this is like my last night, to be with my friends and see my friends, and it could be the last time I see my friends. And he said, we in Gaza can't use cell phones because the enemy can maybe tap into that and into our communications, so nobody's allowed to use a cell phone. He goes, so there's a lot of us who are sitting around with absolutely nothing to do except look at the devastation around us. And he said, they decided to bring us books to Gaza for the soldiers. And they just let us pick, and I got one that was written by you. And he said, that book changed everything for me. He said, because reading your story was so compelling, and it was a novel, I think. Reading that story took me out of Gaza. It took me somewhere else. It reminded me of who I used to be and who I hope to be again when all of this is over. None of us want this. None of us want to be this. And none of us want to be in this reality right now. And the only experience I've had of relief and a reminder of my own deep humanity is reading your incredible story. So thank you. Thank you. You writers give us hope when we're there. And Edgar realized that what he could do was tell stories. And so he and his wife went to bereaved families and read to anyone in the family who wanted them to read. They read to kids to give teachers and parents a break in these schools for those who are displaced. He went to hospitals and read. And an IDF soldier, young soldier, who was an amputee, said, "I've always wanted to write. Would you help me?" And together they wrote a piece, and it was published. This is what it means for us as a people to remember. That's what it looks like. It doesn't have to be some grand, huge thing. It can be. That's extraordinary when people are able and willing to do that. That's extraordinary. We don't have to either give what we think is the solution to the whole thing or the whole problem or even a huge part of the problem. We can just give of who we are. We can just give of our interests, our experience, our talent. This is how we remember in our tradition. It is active, and it's about giving. That's how we can remember best, both all of those who fell on October 7th and since, as well as people in our own lives, in our own histories, on whose shoulders we stand. We can remember them by giving, doing even small things. He said about this service that he was doing, there was something about these years that teach you a lot about humility. You learn that, there's very little you can do, that you're not that omnipotent, and that you stick with the little things that kind of make sense to you. Like the amputated soldier I worked with on his writing. But I think all the things that I do, they don't feel crucial or important or full of pathos, but they're all kind of tiny attempts to humanize the world around us. That's what we're asked. That's what we're asked to do. Our teacher, Masua Sagiv from Hartman, who also we've had here teach at KI, a brilliant scholar from Israel, Masua Sagiv said that according to Chen Artzi Sror, the memory of October 7th must be etched into our story as a people as though each one of us experienced it, just like we do at Seder when we say, every person must, remember, every year, right? You've heard it every year, right? Every year we must each experience this evening as if we ourselves had been slaves in Egypt and had been redeemed. That is the commandment of Pesach. That is the mitzvah of the Seder. Ke'ilu hu yatsa mitzrayim. Each one has to really experience the Seder and that story as if we ourselves had gone out of Egypt and live into the responsibilities of that freedom because it's a gift that we're free. Doesn't matter it happened how long ago? Doesn't matter. We're supposed to act like it happened to us so that we take seriously the gift of freedom and all that that means we need to do to make it possible for other people. And so she shares this poem from Chen Artzi Sror, written after October 7th. Every person is obligated to see themselves as if they came out of Be'eri, out of Kfar Aza, out of Sderot, out of Ofakim. They are obligated to remember and never forget until the last day. That is not meant to cultivate fear. On the contrary, it is meant to create hope. Once again, the elderly will sit in the fields of Be'eri, and the streets of the city of Sderot will be filled with children playing. The burnt houses will be repainted, the fields will be plowed, and the tomatoes will be harvested. The existential threat will end. This is not a prophecy of consolation. This is a plan of action. May we go into this year, may we go into Yizkor, may we go into every time we remember, may we go in with this commitment to making memory for us, for everyone we love, for people whose names we don't even know, for all who have sacrificed so that we can be here. May we make their memories something by remembering them not being anything about despair or only sadness and loss, but let it be for each of us, for all of us, a plan of action. Good Yom Tov.